stars are in light, though we would know.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Improving Sales Performance livecast. I am so excited that you're here today. I'm so excited about the guest that we have here today. Special preview. This is his book. It's absolutely amazing. You should go check it out. And let me just say thank you for everyone that is joining us live, whether it's on LinkedIn livecast or on YouTube live, the livecast on YouTube. If you are here live and you want to chime in and let us know where you are or where you're watching today, go ahead and drop a comment in the comment box. If you have a question for our guest today, who is Jim Doyle, and I'll get to that in just a second. If you have a question for our guest today, go ahead and drop that in the comment box as well. We can see them. They are live when we see them, maybe about a 15 or 16 second delay, but we'll try to get to them if we can. If you are not successful getting your question asked today during the live cast, you can always reach out to Jim at his LinkedIn, which we'll put up on the screen so that you can see that and you can have that later. But for now, let's jump in and let me do a proper introduction to one of my absolute favorite people. And I have a little story I'll tell after the intro. Jim Doyle. Jim made his first sale as a broadcast sales rep 50 years ago this month. 50 years. Think about that. So if you want to do the math, that makes Jim officially really old. Old, right? Okay. He fell in love with our business 30 years ago, and he led Jim Doyle and Associates, which is now called JDA Media. He helped thousands of salespeople fall in love with TV and digital sales and the business. And also, and this is where Jim and I really connect in a big way, he also made them fall in love with their ability to make a difference in their clients. And that's ultimately why we do what we do, is to make a difference in our clients. Now, some people, when they retire, they go and play golf. But from what I understand about Jim's golf game, he sucks. You're not a good golfer. Which, Jim, you and I have that in common too, because
this is a great introduction.
I'm the worst golfer ever. Listen, so here's what Jim decided to do. And boy, this is so awesome. And I'm so thankful, Jim, that you decided to do this. He decided to interview dozens of incredible salespeople from 20 different industries to see if the characteristics of top sellers in those businesses were similar to what he had learned from the very best top sellers in the digital and TV business. I'm excited about today's discussion. CSS and Jim's company have been competitors for years and years and years. But one thing we absolutely agree on and always have is it is about making a significant impact for the client. Welcome, Jim, to the show. We are delighted that you are here.
Other than the part about being old and sucking at golf, that was a great intro.
Let me say this, because
which are true.
What can you do, right?
Yeah.
So let me say this, because I have gotten a lot of emails and text messages over the past few days since we started promoting that you were going to be on this, and people were like shocked. Wait, Matt and Jim, CSS and Jim Doyle? What? So you and I were talking about this before. We both watched on Disney. We watched the Beatles, that Peter Jackson documentary that he put together, Let It Be. Yep. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, it's phenomenal, right?
Fabulous.
Yeah. So now that I've done that, I've been sucked into YouTube watching every interview that Paul, John, Ringo, or George has ever given anybody. And I saw an interview recently with Paul McCartney, and they asked him, is it true that you and the Rolling Stones did not get along? That the Beatles and the Rolling Stones like hated each other? There was this fierce, and he said, no, we were actually friends. We liked each other. In fact, I think if I remember correctly, Paul and John wrote one of the original Rolling Stones hits. They were contemporaries and friends, and yes, they competed, I guess, for record sales, but they all wanted to just perform and do great music. And I think, Jim, you and I, in our conversations over the years, we just want to help people grow their business and help salespeople do a better job doing it.
Well, I'm glad you liked us that much, because we hated you. No, of all, I'm really kind. I'm sorry that it wasn't reciprocated, but no, people who know me and have heard me talk about you guys, we have all kinds of people who compete for the same budgets, and there's a lot that you just go, and then there's some that you go, those guys are good. Yeah. And we have so much respect. I've always had so much respect for your process and your folks, and so this is a privilege. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I am just excited that you're here today, because this book is incredible. Nice job. Congratulations. And before we jump into this, if anyone wants the book, we've just put it up on the screen. Make sure to go to servantsellingbook.com. You can get it there. You can go to Amazon. You can get it there. Anywhere you can buy a book, you can buy this book. All right, Jim, why did you decide to write the book? Fill us in.
Well, because I suck at golf, so I think that's part of it. No, if you go to Google and you go, sales books or books on sales, the titles that you get back, I mean, there's like 500,000. Closing, dealing with, and then my favorite, winning. And I got to be honest, that stuff makes me gag. And that's the perception that so many people have of salespeople.
Yeah.
That we're a group of people who, as one of the people I interviewed for the book said, he said, I was taught that the customer has my money and I got to get my money. And yet you and I both know that the people that we know who are extraordinary in this business, it's the opposite of that. Hey, they're very focused on closing the sale, and they are very aware of when they do that in the process. But that's not what it's about. It's about how can they make a difference, and if they can make a difference. And so I just wanted to reject this idea that we're somehow winning and taking somebody's money, and that's what we see as sales. It's not, from my view, it's not that at all.
Yeah, at the core, we're in the business of helping people grow their business.
Exactly.
I mean, that we do that, we get it right. So big picture, and then we'll get into the specifics. Big picture, what's the book about?
Well, I think that so I had this idea really in a quiet time, early in the stages of the pandemic, to do the book. Had the title in my head, and then probably the gift of this book was the idea to interview all these different people in all these different industries. And by the way, the first title of the book, the first word in the title is selling. So the people that I interviewed are mega high achievers, people whose sales records just blow me away. I would get off the phone on these calls and go, wow, I mean, that person's so good and has done so much. And so what I wanted to do was say, what can we steal from them? I've always been a big believer that I want to hang out with smart people and I want to learn from smart people. And so these were some of the smartest and best and most effective salespeople I'd ever seen. So I was trying to figure out, I knew a lot of the media folks and what they had done well. What else were people doing and how was it successful? That became the fun part.
I'm glad you said it that way. I have a mentor of mine, a former client, but sometimes clients can be mentors, right? You have a lot of respect for them. He always said, success leaves clues, right? It's like, look at what the really good people are doing. Let's learn a little bit from them. All right. So the title of the book, Selling with a Servant Heart. Explain, what is selling with a servant heart?
Well, I think if you think about what selling with a servant heart salespeople do, they are obsessed with customer outcomes. I think that's way more than being customer focused. When that becomes your obsession, and I'll tell you how that manifests. I would hope people would have described me as a win-win seller. And I would hope that people would have thought that I was that way. What I discovered was that servant heart sellers, it's way more than win-win. For them, they're so focused on the win for the customer that they believe that if it's good for the customer, ultimately it will be good for them. So they may not even in the short term take a sale or make a deal if they believe in the long term it's going to be right for their customers. And yet they win because in the process of being that way, they develop such extraordinary loyalty that their churn goes down sometimes to numbers that you'd just be astounded by. One of the guys I interviewed, this guy, Dave Wall, he sells these expensive motor coaches. One person, he probably sells more in the RV space than 90% of the RV dealers do.
Really?
So I mean, can you imagine one guy who sells like more than 90% of the dealers? This guy sells these $2 million coaches, but he's got a 60% return business, repeat business, and 30% referral. His customers love him. And the guy who said, you got to get to know this guy, was a former client of mine. And I know he's a tough buyer, tough negotiator. And he just went on and on and on about this guy. And I said, well, what does he do? He said, I'll give you an example. He said, I've got a question about my coach. I pick up the phone to call him. He answers the phone. We talk for a while. And I said, Dave, where are you? He said, I'm in Argentina. He's answering a question from a customer on a satellite phone in Argentina. Now, I said to Dave later on, I said, is that, isn't it good to get away? He said, Jim, I take 2 minutes to answer that question, and it makes a statement to him that he's now told, 30 people about. That's just going so far above and beyond being customer focused.
That's an incredible story, and truly someone that cares, really cares about making sure that their customers are getting what they need and getting their questions answered in a timely way is what his customers needed.
Well, I think what the servant heart sellers say, one of them actually said to me, he said, I work for them. I mean, they really view that their role is that they're an unpaid member of that customer's team and that client's team. I know that's something that's things that you guys talk about a lot with in the sales training part of your business. We become partners with our customers, and then but I think there's a big thing in that, which is, I mean, probably if you said, I took one thing away from this book that probably I was surprised about was how if you get a relationship that is that based on trust, you better be good. And what I mean by good is you better know your stuff, and you had better bring the ideas and you have a responsibility to trust is the lesson. that I wrote about that just really struck me. It's one thing to build the relationship, but if I bring the relationship and I can't bring the solution, then I haven't honored the relationship or that customer's trust.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Throughout the book, the theme of sincerity runs through, in the sense that this is not a tactic to win business. This is truly, you have to feel this way. This salesperson that you were just talking to, he wasn't picking up the phone while in Argentina because he learned a sales tactic somewhere that's a good thing to do. He did it because he cares about his customers.
Yeah. I think that is absolutely true. But, I interviewed these amazing salespeople, and yet it was surprising how many of them said to me, that was not my default. In other words, being a servant heart seller was not my natural inclination.
Oh, interesting.
And interestingly enough, that might be especially true for men. In fact, we interviewed a couple of research guys, and one of them said, men, especially when they're younger, sometimes have what he called this testosterone-fueled drive to win and to succeed. And that might be the antithesis of servant heart selling in many ways, until they get to the point where they describe winning in different ways.
Yeah, there may be a maturity.
And I think, look, I was probably that way.
Yeah, I get that.
I was going to the close early and close often seminars going, ooh, I got to try that.
I went to that same Tom Hopkins seminar.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like Hopkins used to talk about inverted tie downs and and all those things, and I know them all. That would make sense for you, wouldn't it, Matt? It's like, I know all that stuff. I just don't think it works.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right. So in the book, you talk about the 10 lessons from servant heart sellers. Share one of them with us here and tell us a little bit more, like go deep into it. Give us an example.
Yeah. So one of the lessons would not be a surprise to anybody on this call who's gone through the stuff that you guys believe in and worked with your company or ours, is called Ask a Million Questions. And it comes out of a question that I have a spiritual advisor, mentor, coach, I guess, who has this way of asking me questions I can't answer, like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And but he said one day he asked me how come I thought I'd been successful, and I quickly said, I think I've asked a million questions. And but when you interview the servant heart sellers, not only are they committed to that, but Rory Vaden, this amazing speaker, trainer, and guy that I have a great respect for.
He's awesome. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's out of Nashville, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And he's a Toastmasters #1 speaker, New York Times best-selling list, really, for a book called Take the Stairs. But he said, he talked about a process called acute listening. And acute listening is like if you're in a crowded room listening, but you can hear a pin drop in a crowded room. And I don't know about you, my wife Paula might think that I was not always good at acute listening, and that listening without thinking about the next question, listening to really hear the answer. I had a friend who was a producer of a 60 Minutes kind of show, and he taught me a technique. He said when they were interviewing bad guys, they would ask the question, but then they would train the reporter, don't respond. And they said you would get the first sort of rehearsed answer, and after a little bit of silence, they would talk again. And that's when you got the most honest answer, the most compelling piece of sound. And I always thought, what a great exercise that would be for salespeople if we could discipline ourselves to not just immediately respond with another question. But asking questions has a partner, and the partner is good questions. I think too many sales reps that we've worked with, their idea of diagnosis is, how's your business? How's the market right now? What are you doing for advertising?
What's your budget?
Yeah, we'll get there. And that's not the business conversation that we're talking about. When I have a business conversation, I immediately begin to earn trust. Trust is the currency that's so important in today's selling environment.
Yeah, Jim, I could not agree with you more. Again, I'm going to just give another plug. If you haven't got this book, you need to go get it. It's an easy read, people. It's not going to take you forever. It's a good, quick read.
And it's on Audible for the salespeople. So there you go.
Did you record it?
I did record the Audible. Yeah.
Very nice. Nicely done.
Yeah. I couldn't let anybody else do it.
It comes to life. I almost wish I would have done that instead of read it.
Well, you still could. $9.
$9. There you go. All right, let me ask you a final question. And you kind of alluded to it in a few minutes ago, when you referenced how these servant heart sellers actually believe and say, I work for the client. I get that. I've heard that too. Managing those people, any advice, any tips for, maybe that's your next book, is how to manage the selling with the servant heart sellers.
Well, after I sort of outlined the book, I added a couple of chapters in the back for managers about that, because it is, as your question suggests, it is a real world issue. First of all, there's two things I think are important to talk about. One is that servant heart sellers will occasionally forget who they work for. And it is sometimes a challenge to make sure that but the other part, and the second part, is if they feel like you are in opposition to their desire to make a difference, and if they feel like you have a set of values that's in the opposite of that, or all you care about is making the sale, you're going to find that person may choose to go do work someplace else.
Yeah.
And because they want somebody, they will appreciate. One of the people I interviewed for the book, she said, I love a good business argument. And she'll have a good business argument with her bosses, and she'll have a good business argument with her clients occasionally, about, just the different approaches but at some point, if I'm a servant heart seller and I don't feel like you're at least listening to me and trying to make it right for my customer or make a difference, then I'm going to be frustrated. But on the other hand, as a leader, I am occasionally going to have to say, hey, I know what you're trying to accomplish. Maybe we can look at doing it this way, but that's not going to work. And it's a delicate balance.
It really is. And as a good leader is probably going to welcome that, right? A good leader will welcome that.
I think I wrote in the book that by the time the leaders got to that part of the book, they probably had already demonstrated that was the kind of person they were. Robert Greenleaf in the 70s wrote a book on servant leadership.
Yes.
And boy, if anybody's a leader and hasn't looked at the Center for Servant Leadership's website with all the resources they have, and his was about, a servant leader essentially focuses on the well-being and growth of their people. And I think obviously a servant seller focuses on the well-being and growth of their customers. I think, if anything, the pandemic era has shown that the command and control leadership that I both grew up in and probably endorsed in the early parts of my career probably isn't going to work much anymore. So if you can become a servant leader, you'll attract servant sellers, and you'll set billing and revenue records because that group gets it done, and they get it done in a very powerful way.
Yeah, and as I said earlier about the person I know that always said success leaves clues, I mean, that's essentially what you've done here. You've gone out and talked to dozens of very, very, very successful salespeople in many different industries, tied it back, and it's obvious these are the people that are having the most success. But you know what? Their clients are also having a tremendous amount of success.
Right. What is it? Ziegler said, we can get anything we want when we help people get what they want.
Yeah,
that's like timeless wisdom. I think the more I serve, the more we sell, the more impact we have.
Absolutely. Jim, I cannot thank you enough for being
thank you
on our live cast today.
And we didn't hit each other. We didn't
there was no fighting, there was no arguing. People are disappointed.
Although I'm probably the Rolling Stones guy, because I'm still, a little bit like Mick Jagger trying to prance around the stage in my 70s.
If you want to get a hold of Jim, if you have additional questions, you can reach him on his LinkedIn. Just go to his LinkedIn. And if you want to get the book, which I highly recommend, please go to servantsellingbook.com or Amazon and look it up. It's there. It's great. It's wonderful. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Quick show notes just for other people that are here or watching. Please, if you like this type of stuff, like, subscribe, hit the alert button. But I really want to let you know you need to subscribe because we're going to be changing to a new format of more of a podcast versus a live cast. And there's a little bit of semantics about that. The biggest benefit to everyone watching is that we're going to be able to produce more content than just once a week. And every single time we upload a new podcast, you'll get notified. So please subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate it. And Jim, thanks again for being our guest. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great week.
I've been told that the fire's over.